So welcome one and all to this festive edition of the Psychonautica panel. We'll be discussing something that feels appropriate for this time of year, spirituality. And appropriate because for some, Christmas is the most important spiritual event, and for others it's New Year, signifying an opportunity to change or a new start on another trip around the sun. But for psychonauts like me and my companions here who find ourselves on a slightly different trajectory, what does spirituality mean for us? And are we even talking about the same experiential stuff? So to unpack this, I am joined by some of the finest minds from across the Psychonaut community. And whilst particularly tonight's appearances might be deceiving, rest assured there is a lot of wisdom behind our festive attire. So where you might see crazy people, then I see some of the finest explorers of consciousness that I had the pleasure to make the acquaintance of. Now, for anyone who's joining for the first time, then my name is Rob, also known as Adeptus Psychonautica. And as a special festive treat to myself, then rather than going around the room and having my esteemed colleagues tell you who they are, I'm going to introduce everyone personally. So first, we have the supremely talented visionary artist, Loka. And Loka is one of the most prolific replicators out there, has collaborated with many of the big psychedelic channels. And if I remember rightly, Loka, you've even had a mention on the Joe Rogan Experience. So chances are that if you've been browsing YouTube for videos of someone who's slipping into a psychedelic state, that was probably done by Loka. Next, we've got someone who is a truly wonderful combination of youthful curiosity and old soul wisdom. My brother in the study of unspeakable mystical languages and just all-round awesome ubermensch, Gabe Hardy. And moving on from that, we have the irrepressible energy of Jake Knows Nothing, who, contrary to his namesake, not only knows a lot, but has a drive to expand that knowledge with a commitment to open-mindedness and humility that I find both contagious and extremely endearing. Second to last, we have Tyler Saucier from Find the Others. And within our little Psychetubers group, I think of Tyler as the voice of calmness and serenity, although you would not know that to look at him tonight, which I think personally perfectly personifies that at the same time he manages that balance while being just as equally batshit as the rest of us. And finally, we've got someone who, through their content, has been a major inspiration in my own journey and someone who I catch spiritual echoes of in the places we've traversed along the way and the people that we know in common. And so it is an absolute pleasure to once again catch up with my friend, Dakota of the planet Earth. And also, I just want to tip the hat to some absent friends, Josie Kins, who put this group together, along with panel regular Vivek and many others who couldn't make it for this conversation. To them, and also to all of you watching, a big thank you and cheers. And with that, let's get this panel rolling along the topic of spirituality. So obviously there's no right answers or wrong answers here. There's just our different perspectives on this crazy human experience, which I would say is a spiritual experience. But let's open it up to you guys. Do you think spirituality is even a real thing? And if so, let's just go around the room. How would you define it? Who's going to go first?
First, you have to define what does real mean. And then you have to consider what does spiritual mean, right? I think that spiritual, really, if I were to point to it, I think it's anything that is non-physical, really. And then if you really investigate the physical, you realize that it's made of spirit, and that's what Maya is the illusion that this is all solid concrete. The definition of hallucination is appearance without substance. And on the mushrooms, I learned that everything is appearance with no real substance. So, yeah, I'll kick it off with that.
Okay, let's pass it up to Gabe.
I feel like this is a very loaded question, Rob.
It is, man. It's the most loaded.
Yeah. What does spirituality mean to you, dude? I feel like it's constantly like changing for me. You know,
okay.
It seems like the closer I am to like an intense experience, the more spiritual, I guess you could say, I am. But yeah, I'll pass it off to somebody else for now. But
okay, let's go sideways to Jake.
What is spirituality to me? I guess first and foremost, my definition of it is just like that ineffable quality of my life. Like it's kind of like a fundamental aspect of a human being. Like I feel like everyone, whether they acknowledge it or not, has a framework of spirituality in their life that they reference throughout the day and certainly when things get tough. So I think it's that whatever kind of whatever model of reality that you put in place when you think of things that aren't concrete or well understood, I feel like that all falls under the umbrella of a spirituality. And so in that context, yeah, it's real. But the way that it's applied, like a lot of times it's all total bullshit. So it gets a little muddy.
Okay. Dakota, you've traveled the world, experienced a lot of different things. Where would you pin this if you could put a pin in it?
It's an interesting question. I mean, like spirituality is very hard to define, but I think for me, what it is just this kind of the mystery of life itself. I think when we like start to examine and question who we are, I think there are these feelings that come up, and we call those feelings spirituality. And I think, like, I mean, you can get that from anything, just looking out into the night sky and thinking about life and different rituals. There's so many different practices that inspire these feelings that we call spiritual. I personally think it's real. I think there is some like strange quality about the universe, some strange quality about our own lives. Consciousness itself is so unusual when you really look at it. And to me, any practice of trying to explore that is a spiritual practice, I think. And I think like also when you look throughout cultures, throughout history, since, I mean, as far as we can go back, there have always been a tendency for us to like to be looking at this part of reality, all the different mythologies, all the different ideas. I think there is like an inherent quality that we recognize. I mean, as pattern recognizing creatures, as humans, this is one of the patterns we recognize, that there's this thing that we can't fully speak about, but we can feel it somewhere, maybe in our intuition or in our quiet moments. Yeah, I think spirituality is definitely real.
Do you think of it as a function of consciousness? Then you mentioned like would the universe be spiritual even without people observing it?
That's what I was going to throw in there, is I think it's important to ask ourselves, when did we develop this sort of spirituality and spiritual practices? Because like it might be associated with us becoming conscious of ourselves.
Well, that might be part of our awareness of it.
Like spirituality is this kind of overlaying truth of life itself. And we build these tools, which we call practices, to examine that. But I think this quality, this unusual quality that we're like just in, kind of the fishbowl that holds life together, like when we get out of our own heads and we pay attention to that, I think that's what spirituality is. I don't necessarily think it means like, wearing a robe or, a halo above your head, or even good feelings. I think spirituality is really, for me, in my personal opinion, is just like the mystery, whatever this mystery of life is, like the thing that we can't know, the source of the beginning and the end. And just, to me, any examination of that is a spiritual practice.
Yeah, I would agree. I think of it more as it is a state of being, or rather it is being in the state where you have access to that, just much like there are feelings of intense feelings of love or intense feelings of passion. And I think these are also kind of fundamentally true, although you won't expect these things to be a kind of a persistent state. You won't be in a state of like passionate lust all the time. But it's very much a part of the human experience. And all these things are sort of equally desirable. It is desirable to be in love. It's desirable to feel attached to someone, desirable to feel that spiritual thing. But it's not this constant. It's not persistent, which is where I think where I kind of fall out with a lot of the kind of spiritual culture, which whereas to talk about this as though it's something permanent, like you just kind of like have this kind of moment of enlightenment and then you can like forever. And I don't think that's accurate, nor even desirable, but these kind of windows of looking into it just are intrinsically something human to it. It's also intrinsically human, the ability to completely forget about what a powerful moment that is, as somebody then cuts you off on the drive on the motorway, like, motherfucker, I'll burn you and your fucking children to, So it's yeah, I don't think that when people talk about having these like spiritual awakenings, I don't think it's something kind of permanent. And I think you said something really good there, Dakota, in that it's the practice and the commitment to the practice which will sort of give you better and more access to that state if you want it. And if you don't want it, then there are lots of distractions which will keep you far away from that state. But to me, it seems like all the stuff I recognize as fundamentally good within myself, and when I feel like aligned spiritually, I know that's like, I feel like that is where I should be. I mean, I can feel it. I can literally feel like if I'm off kilter, like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. But when I feel that sort of spiritual alignment, I feel like, okay, this is actually my true self here. I should do this.
I think an important,
and it's that practice which will get me there.
I think a very important part of the spiritual quest, that journey, right, that a lot of us find ourselves in, is that you come up and then you come back down. You come up and you come back down. And the goal, right, the ultimate attainment is to stay high, right? Because when you're high, there's clarity, there's fulfillment, right? You're very close. Your heart is open, right? But then maybe you're in traffic and some asshole cuts you off and that brings you down, right? But the practice is to catch yourself, to not get caught up in these petty little things, right? That bring you back down. And really that's showing you where you aren't, right? That's showing you what work you really have to do. So I think everything is a spiritual guru at the end of the day. The universe is constantly testing your ability to stay grounded, to stay present. So a part of the practice, at least my everyday practice, is how can I stay high, right? And maybe the goal isn't really to just stay high all the time, because that's very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. But it's there's all of these. The universe is going to test you at every angle to see where it can pull you back down into your ego, right? So yeah, that's a big part of the journey is recognizing that you're going to come back down. You're going to go up and down. And yeah, meditation is great to practice, to really practice staying high, mindfulness and that constant presence. It's challenging, but psychedelics are a good way to put you in there and remind you that being high is even possible, right? I don't think being high is necessarily a drug related thing specifically. I think being high is a term that's used for maybe not commonly used for this thing, but yeah, if you meditate for 10 days straight, really proper like meditation, then you can find yourself really, really, really high.
Spiritual high.
Yeah, maybe centered, thinking of it as centered as opposed to high or low is maybe a better way to go about that.
What I mean by that is
you can experience those highs and lows.
What I mean by that is maybe a higher level of conscious awareness, right? And these psychedelic substances can just crank up this consciousness knob, or maybe it's a sobriety knob, and it makes you more sober than your everyday sobriety, right? You might even feel that your everyday normal waking state is drunk compared to some of the states you can find yourself in these psychedelic states. So that's why I say getting
that's
high.
a very common, very common response is people, talk about like having the awakening before I was clouded, and and this is one of the things where when people talk around like psychedelics as a cheat, or hey, you should meditate for this, and I wouldn't really dispute this. I mean, I think they are a cheat. I think they are, depending on how we call cheat, a shortcut. But I've got to be realistic with myself. I would never. I don't think have come to some of the realizations and some of the practices I've had today without having had that kick in the fucking ass.
Yeah, no way, me too.
Yeah, I just wouldn't have done it, and I was too stuck in my particular like vision that there was just no way I would have even considered meditation. In fact, I was happy being an arsehole. Maybe I'm an arsehole today. I don't know.
I think that's the miracle of psychedelics. Is there like a tool that shows us what's possible with consciousness, and then that's sort of a goal that you can set, and then on your daily basis try to just get closer, ever closer to that in baby steps. But I don't even think it's a lifelong practice. I think it has to do with hundreds of thousands of incarnations of work on your soul so that you can attain the ultimate, right? But there's eternity, so you have all day to do it. There's no rush, so it's really up to you what your pace is.
Why are psychedelics cheating in terms of spirit? Why is that notion out? I don't understand. Why is that cheating?
I got a story that you guys will probably like.
Go for it.
In January of this year, I went to India. And I went with a couple friends, and they brought 5-MeO DMT to India. And our goal was to give them to different sadhus that we meet during our trip in India. A sadhu is like the kind of a Hindu monk, like these yogis, these naked guys that cover themselves in ash, and they're just kind of have no families, and they just kind of wander the streets, and very interesting people. And there are these people in India right now. There's people living in caves. They're, do these practices like they just give up talking and never talk again, or they put their arm up and never put their arm down. Like India has so many different expressions of spirituality. And I was like, what happens when you give these guys these psychedelics? Like in my head, I was like, dude, we're gonna take this there. We're gonna blow these guys' minds. Like show them like, oh yeah, check this out. We'll show you what we're doing over here, and in the U.S. And we were in Varanasi, which is a holy city in India. It's super old. I think it's one of the oldest cities the oldest city that has been continuously inhabited for 8,000 years or something. So very long time. And in India, this is a very holy city to the point that they go there at the end. A lot of Hindus go there that can afford it at the end of their lives to die there and then be burned next to the water. And you can just go there, and these cremations are happening openly. You just walk by, and you can just watch these bodies being burned, and it's just a pile of fire with a body on top of it. So we go there for this little ceremony that we're going to put together. The bodies are here, and we go across the water. And there's this sadhu that I spent a lot of time with. I talk to him all the time still. And I was so excited to give him this and just watch him be like, damn, you guys are really doing something wild. And we laid out a blanket. We did a ceremony like we would like a real kind of ceremony. My friend had his drum. He was playing music, and we made sure to give him enough that would blast him off. And he sat there in kind of a meditation pose and closed his eyes. And we just blasted him off as good as we could. And I've watched so many people smoke 5-MeO DMT. Sorry if this is loud behind me. Someone's snow blowing or something.
Good, man.
And I've watched so many people smoke this, and out of the probably 100 people I've watched smoke this 5-MeO, people, they collapse. They become like a corpse. You lift their arm up, their arm just falls. They're not there anymore. You're completely just immersed in a different universe. But he just sat there the whole time. And he cleared his throat, and he opened his eyes and looked at me, and he just said, "Are you happy now?" And I was like, "What?" Oh, because he was only doing it for me, you know. He was
Yeah.
just like, I'm only doing this just because you're begging me to do it.
Like
And he
Ram Dass once
told
put
me,
it, you don't need a bus to Detroit
yeah,
if you're in
it
Detroit.
is very much like the Ram Dass story. And even like what
Yeah.
he said, this 5-MeO DMT, we call it sapo. In Spanish, sapo is toad. This comes from the toad in Mexico. So we were calling it sapo. And he said, sapo, it gives you, it's like some light that gives you, and in this light, you see spiritual power. You get to see like the potential of real, true spiritual essence. But then you come back, and maybe 1 day, 2 days, a month later, you're completely back to your old habits, your bad habits. Like, where is that spiritual power now that you saw? And for me, that's like why psychedelics are kind of a shortcut. Oh, and what he said, this is some 5-minute light, but my light is forever. I was like, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's true. Like, the psychedelics will show you the spiritual potency that's inside yourself, or that's like in nature, where you finally see the oneness. You finally feel these feelings that like religions are made because of. But then, like, realistically, I mean, I don't want to speak for you guys, but like, I've done a lot of psychedelics, and when I'm back at home, I'm, you know, just like back to all kinds of bad habits, eating bad food. I'm like watching bad media. And so I think like this is why psychedelics can be a shortcut, is because it's like, it does require hard work. It's definitely not easy to go through like, you know, some kind of DMT experience, and especially have that as like a lifestyle when you're taking it once a year or many times in your life. Like, that's not easy work to work through that, but it's different to even just sit down for like 10 minutes a day. I can hardly sit down. I could eat like 5 grams of mushrooms and be tripping out and freaking out and in the depths of the universe. But like, for me to sit down for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, that's like, it's a big challenge.
See, for that, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, I suppose for most people, like, it's, we're trying to navigate that balance between the guru in India who's hold their arm up for 30 odd years. That's, I mean, that's just so far out of the capabilities of your average person. And that it's almost like, you give that person 5-MeO DMT, and I don't know, it's like, are you surprised when they're kind of like immune to it or something like that?
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's another question to this, like, I mean, how the fuck does somebody do that? Because then it brings up all sorts of interesting questions, which is like, what, I mean, I've struck with like the Ram Dass stories and stuff like that. Like, I'm kind of the belief that if you give somebody enough dose of something, it will do something.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, could somebody guru their way through anesthetic, you know, like, anesthesia? I don't know if, I don't know. But then when you've got something that is so profoundly tied to consciousness, then is it any wonder that they can navigate that better than me, like foaming at the mouth, like on the floor? So I don't know, it's tricky, but I kind of wanted the story to end. I wanted it to end like, oh man, and this guy turned around and said, "Whoa, fuck it!"
I know. That's what I was hoping.
I know you did.
in my vision going there, I was like, yes, like I'm gonna get this, like these sadhus, I'm gonna blow their mind. They're gonna see like real spirituality and like
they'll be
interested.
Following me, like they'll be washing my feet.
Yeah. And they were like, we gave it to 3 people, and like it definitely worked. Like, I could see that it's working for them. It's not like the Neem Karoli Baba, nothing happened type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just out of the 3 we gave it to, they all handled it. They all sat through it. Like, they didn't limp and fall down. And they all said that they've been there. Like, they've been there before.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's that kind of feeling of familiarity that
I think
comes out.
To use the that point that you drew of anesthetics, right? Like, in my experience, like administering those types of things, like there are patients that have a higher tolerance to it through past substance use, right? So the same could be true in this instance, where these people through these practices have a higher baseline of these substances that their brain is already operating on. So their reality is already very close to the DMT reality that we're hoping to get a glimpse of. And my point to all of this is really that is all evidence of it not being a cheat, because it's just a glimpse. Like if you took it once and then you achieved the same state that, this practiced monk for decades achieved, then that would be cheating. That's not fair. But if I'm allowed to just take a flashlight and turn it on real fast just to see the room that I'm working with, what's possible around me, and then I know, okay, I'll start to work. I'll do the work. I'll learn how to meditate. I'll do whatever it takes so I can keep seeing the beauty of that around me. I feel like in that way, it's so powerful. I get confused when people say that it's cheating or something like. If it was a once and done thing, that's cheating, man. That's not fair. But first of all, it's hard to do, and it doesn't last. Like, you come right back to being a loser, and you have to put in the work anyways.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What's fascinating about what you were telling is that for some reason, out of all of the major religions, it seems like Hinduism and other Eastern practices are the most tapped into the psychedelic realm as we experience it. And just as far as spirituality goes, I grew up in a Christian environment, and I'm sure a lot of people here have too. You become disillusioned with that. It's a form of institutionalized spirituality. And then the psychedelics come along, and then it cuts out the middleman, and you're able to experience the oneness, experience the mystery. And for a lot of us too, there's like this Hindu vibe going on, or maybe even Mayan vibe going on. So what do you think that the Hindu side of that has to do with it?
I think Hinduism is the oldest living shamanic tradition that's still around. I mean, ganja, that's a Sanskrit word. Datura, that's a Sanskrit word. I mean, the whole practice is about like altered states of consciousness and stuff, and breaking boundaries of the things that anchor you to. They're the science of the psychedelic experience, basically.
Yeah.
Yoga is is a spiritual science. It's what the psychedelic reveals to you. It's the same conclusions in yoga.
Right. But because it's still an institution, it can still lead to dogma. Like you've heard about the cow murders and stuff.
Oh, there's total dogma in India, for sure.
There's a lot of people who don't have any real preconceptions of something like Hinduism, who will interact with like Hindu-like entities and deities, which I think is interesting because there's always that question of like, did Terrence McKenna put the machine elves in the DMT realm by just talking about it and sort of like manifesting that through people's, subconscious? But when people are meeting entities that they have no sort of like preconceived notion of, it's, it comes back to this whole like materialism and idealism.
There's two
sort of thing.
two ways that I look at it. Either like we have a limit in our sort of imagination, that these sort of shapes come in the vision and the flash of the DMT or whatever, and we have a limited filter of things we can project onto that shape. Oh, it looks like a snake. Oh, it looks like I don't know. I guess like some of the more weird ones, like the praying mantis or something.
I was reading something really interesting the other day because I've heard of this, and Josie drops a lot of good content on this sort of stuff. But there was this one study done where they gave DMT to volunteers who had aphantasia, I think it is. Have you guys ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Aphantasia is people who don't have mental imagery. But there was many people with aphantasia who took DMT who still reported entity contact at like different levels, whether that be some sort of like communication they got, or just like people described it as like a feeling. I need to go back and like find that article so Rob can link it and stuff. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. What do you guys think of that?
A proper way to make somewhat sense of what you just said is in terms of like logical, like to break it down. I think that if you start to separate the idea of the physical brain and your mind as different things, the brain can kind of restrict and filter things. But if your consciousness can transcend the physical brain, then you're no longer limited by its its limitations. So I think that's why people experience, when they break through on DMT, they no longer experience the restrictions that the human brain, the organism, imposes, right? And they can experience, hyperdimensional reality with incredible detail, and they might feel like there's no way my brain can generate this level of complexity, and it even feels more real than real. Well, that's because your consciousness is experiencing far less limitations of experience, right? And your brain, the human organism, the brain, can kind of filter and add these sort of artifacts of experience, like visual snow and maybe tremors in your muscles, your nervous system. These are sort of like glitches in your experience that make it feel less real, less pure. But then if your consciousness can leave the physical brain, right, then you can experience such a purity of consciousness that it feels more real than this. But people with aphantasia, I think maybe their brain has some weird thing in the wiring that restricts them from having that mental eye. So they can't visualize an apple when you say, think of an apple. They can't see it in their head.
Oh man, that suck.
So I've met a lot of people with aphantasia, but
Damn.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Just everything looks like primordial goo. Like no matter what you try and imagine, it's just all goop. Like it's just
black.
No, I just
fuzz.
want to cycle back round to. Yeah, I just want to cycle back to the cheating thing, because it is a kind of, I think it's kind of not cheating. I think that there is a way to go down that route, and some of us had our experience of like working with like shamans who deeply work with these plants, and that has become the practice. And I don't think I certainly wouldn't accuse them of
cheaters.
No, well, not at all. I mean, these are hardcore people, unequivalent with what you were just saying, Dakota, about
definitely
the people who they're drinking ayahuasca 4 or 5 times a week every day. 2
years.
So I mean, and these guys are sort of taking it all in their stride. And then the kind of the comparison that jumped to mind is where people refer to it as cheating, is that you've got someone like me, and I am this. I take some kind of have some sort of psychedelic experience, and then suddenly I'm this, and it feels like a shortcut, and it feels like cheating. Would we say the same thing if I'd been hit by a car and had a near-death experience? And it's just as instant, and it's just as unplanned, but yet people can have these profound, experience. They come back, they've have like, whoa, I've my life now has completely new meaning. It's completely restructured. But it was something that they can't really take credit for. They got just whacked by a car, and thank God they didn't die. And likewise, there's lots of these kind of, experiences where nobody would deny the kind of the quickness of them or the work that goes into it. Another example I frequently use is like things like, becoming a mother. It happens. They're kind of not in control of it. They might be completely unprepared for it, and suddenly you have this dramatic change of consciousness. Is that cheating? There's just so many things where I think the cheating thing falls apart. Now, I can certainly grant it. I'll definitely grant it takes a lot more hard work, and I've got a lot more respect for the guy who goes and stands over 30 years like with a ram in there, or goes on silent retreat for 3 years. But I think, does it get to the same stuff? I think it does. Is there a benefit to getting to that stuff? Like, are we all supposed to get to the same stuff? Like, I'm never going to be a Shaolin ninja monk, so is it okay for me to have a different path available to me? And I would also completely agree with what Dakota said. Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge of our civilization is that, sure, you can have all the spiritual awakenings you want, but you come back and you're faced with that box of Mars bars, and what are you going to do about it? So yeah, I think the cheating thing, I would say I get it, but I don't think it's completely true or fair, I would say.
Yeah, I guess like how can you cheat in spirituality? A spiritual experience is a spiritual experience.
Yeah, and also
there's a
like,
whole spectrum to it too, because it's like, What's up?
Sorry, go ahead.
Like, we can sit and meditate for 30 minutes every day, or you can just be more kind. That's something that's a lot more achievable, and you can do it with that kind of spiritual intent.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think that being more kind is coming back to the same kind of awareness that Locke was talking about, because that's the practice, isn't it? It's to be aware of what's going on, so that we're not lost in the moment and we don't lose ourselves to rage or to resentments and something like that. And it is that thing of trying to not stay in that permanently high state, but have that door open, so that we're not just falling into the sort of like our basest, shittiest, like, oh my god, I ate all the Mars bars, what did I do? But I suppose one thing I'm kind of interested in, particularly with yourself, Tyler, because you talked a little bit about Christianity, like, now having had these experiences, are we talking about the same stuff? Like I think this is something I struggle as someone who was like a diehard militant atheist, to believe that the people from mainstream religions who I was really judgmental about and really looked down my nose at, and hopefully I'm trying to be better at that, but that they are having these kinds of experiences, because it doesn't seem to correlate with what I observe of them. But I get that. I would say that the US is probably a bit more hardcore religious than the UK. So I don't know what's your experience like. Is it the same stuff? Are we talking about like?
What do you mean the same stuff? Like, are you saying are Christians experiencing that?
Well, I mean, I guess from your, I guess most people within your church would assume they are there for some sort of spiritual thing, a spiritual reason. Mm-hmm. They would say there's something spiritual going on. And then you've got more extreme examples of where you've got, and again, I'm an outsider looking in, but you've got these mega churches in the US where people go, the people are flopping around all over the floor. And something's going on there, which is closer to like the 5-MeO DMT experience of people.
Yeah, it's totally it's just shamanism. It's just because we were all kind of raised Christian and we look at that as like, in a kind of different way. But they're just shamanic practices. All this stuff is.
Yeah. But do you think they're actually? I think
some of them. Yeah, I think the old grandma that goes to church, I think she feels a warmth and a sort of spiritual fuzziness inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't think she's feeling like the kind of depths that a DMT experience will take you to.
I think that
I definitely think she's probably tapped in when she's praying and stuff.
The speaking in tongues situation, I think that, you see a lot of that in the over the top westernized churches, but I think that there's a good chance that some majority of those occurrences might be just them putting on some sort of fake glossolalia performance.
Glossolalia.
Like glossolalia. Yeah. I definitely have had some minor occurrences on certain situations where I have had this spontaneous linguistic sort of pouring out, and it's a very synesthesic sort of hyperdimensional, it's almost like this vomit of concept coming through you. It happens, it's possible, right? And so I've had some mild experience with that, but I do think a lot of the people in some of these mega churches are really just sort of I think a lot of it is maybe not very
going through the motion,
not very genuine. But however, I have met some people in modern westernized Christian churches who get the transmission, who understand that most people's idea of God is sort of more of a concept than the real thing, right? That they have more of like Tyler said, I think somebody said tapped in. They are a little bit more tapped in than just this sort of blind faith of like, hey, I'm just going to believe it because I was told this thing exists and that's that. And we're going to put a cap at that. When my approach to it is like, Let's explore the depths of this thing and really have a direct face-to-face interaction with whatever this universal mind is, right? Which then you come to find out later what it really is. I don't want to do spoiler stuff, right? I don't like giving the whole show away on a podcast, but yeah, I mean, the direct experience.
You've got the answer though, Loka. That.
What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about, dude.
Well, I don't know. You got the spoilers. You must have like the final answer. Is that you're saying that you've reached your final form?
Well, they
your
killed
ultimate...
Jesus for spilling the beans, so I just wonder what they'll do to me if I talk about it. I want to avoid
that, especially at this time of year.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in and kind of not that. Go ahead, Jake. No, so to kind of address this speaking in tongues in the religious setting, right? I'm not on their side whatsoever, but to play devil's advocate, right? I would say that there's like immense power in, call it the placebo effect, human will power, whatever it is. But whatever, at the very least, humans have this ability to conjure up things that kind of manifest themselves in real time in the collective human subconscious, whatever the fuck it is. And I think that these people are having valid spiritual experiences in the context, in the lens of their own little like spiritual microcosm of a world. In the view of their particular religion, they are having a spiritual experience, and probably, I'm sure there's some people who are faking it, of course, but I wouldn't necessarily discredit that just because it's not the full picture, or just because it's maybe being manipulated a little bit by some sort of doctrine, doesn't necessarily mean that they're not dipping their toes into something real and maybe psychedelic and something that we ourselves experience through mushrooms or whatever.
I would say that. Sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
I was going to say, it reminds me of like, have you guys ever played with a Ouija board? Like played, Ouija board with people, and you're sitting there thinking like, there's no fucking way a ghost is actually moving this shit right now. So it's like two possibilities. It's like, well, I guess like three possibilities. Either a ghost is moving it, or either somebody else is knowingly moving it to fuck with you, or somebody's like lied to themselves and placeboed themselves in this way to just ever so slightly brush it, or everybody's kind of subconsciously doing this, and we're all like group tricking ourselves into manifesting this the
collective unconscious thing. That's the spirit that they're maybe unaware. You know what I'm saying? Like, our idea of a ghost is this translucent white thing in a blanket, just like our idea of traditional God is this white guy in the clouds with a beard.
Says the guy in the white blanket.
But maybe the ghost is this non-physical force that can work through the physical world. It can use the physical world as a vehicle to work through it, and every time I eat mushrooms, man, it's sort of like the portals start opening up to synchronicity, and these weird non-physical energies and stuff just start working not only through me, but the people around me who aren't on psilocybin. They seem to be along for the ride in a way, and the world can kind of just fuck with you in this really interesting way. And it's like, maybe that's the ghosts, the non-physical forces that most people are in complete denial about just because they can't knock on it, so.
Yeah. I mean, I live in Switzerland, and, just not far from where I live is where Carl Jung used to live. And, Carl Jung's very revered in sort of like the psychology world. And he absolutely believed in ghosts. In fact, a big part of Jung's work is him sort of balancing what could only be termed as the supernatural with the natural. He documents all these kind of like otherworldly events of hearing, everything from hearing loud noises to like very heavy wooden oak furniture just shattering apart. And so, his mother believed in ghosts. He was a very, spiritualist household, and he had to reconcile all that. And he does this in his work. So he would more or less agree with exactly what you just said, Loka, that there is a paranormal, but it is just the normal, and it does act through this world, whether it's acting through a person or acting through a piece of furniture, just exploding because somebody's rage was so intense that that energy just needed an outlet, and it got grounded through a wooden table somewhere or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, I with the kind of the Ouija board thing, similar to the is it called like Pentecostal church, the speaking in tongues thing? But I think it's a bit of both. I think I don't doubt at all that there is someone who originally did that speaking tongues thing, and it must have been an incredibly powerful thing to witness. And when you see a human act in a way that's just so
alien,
kind of like counterintuitive and sort of almost reality shattering. Yeah, exactly. It's I have epilepsy. Like I've had people say things about when you see people have seizures. It's just a very weird thing to see another person go through. So yeah, eyes in the back of the head. I mean, in Dakota, like I say, I've seen many people on 5-MeO DMT, and you do see some of that there in people smoke bufo and eyes in the head and foaming and crazy contortions and stuff. So I don't doubt that there was someone who originally did it, and I also don't doubt that there's some level of performance where someone's applied that and thought, this works. You hear about kind of stuff like this with Jim Morrison from The Doors, who kind of like famously like would had like a seizure one night on stage and was just riding around and people went fucking nuts for it. And so then he just started doing it every night, and it just became part of the set that he would fall over and start flipping out at some point. So I think there's something of that in that Pentecostal thing, and maybe something of that in a lot of kind of like these traditions and stuff like that. But there is some power in that kind of that shamanism, that core root shamanism, which I think when we see it, we're like, whoa, that's a thing. I don't know what it is, but that is a thing at least. And I can only guess. I mean, this is a lot what you must see in India, Dakota, with you describe like a guy hanging their arm over their head, like that's something you could easily brush off. Like, what the fuck is this guy with his arm above his head? But on the other hand, that's some kind of incredible willpower and devotion to do that.
Could you even imagine? It's so funny because I've seen pictures of him and stuff before. I knew who this guy was. Yeah, I mean, we all probably seen there's a couple of the guys that have their arms like that. And I was at the airport and we were going to this big festival in India, like a big spiritual festival. And I walked by and I just seen this guy with his arm up in the air, and I was like, no way, it's that fucking guy.
It was him?
And I just went and sat by him and I just talked to him and stuff, and it was him.
Wow.
Yeah. He told me for like the first 2 or 3 years, he had to have a rope that tied his arm to the ceiling. And he said it's just the most excruciating, worst pain you could possibly think of. And then slowly it just like it's stuck. I guess the muscles tighten and stuff, and now the whole plane ride he just had his arm up like this. It would completely break if you like grabbed it and tried to like force it down. It would just snap. He told me he's never had sex. He smokes a lot of hash. He says all these things help him.
He sounds dope.
How do you load the
badass?
Yep.
I mean, it's more or less just like sacrificing your arm. You may as well like cut your arm off.
Yeah. Well, I guess like at least my understanding of it is one of the conclusions in yoga is like the body is not who you are, and we get sort of distracted by the impulses of the body, of our hungers, of our of our lust. And these feelings are very strong that it sort of pulls us down into them. And in that flash, we are hunger completely. We are horniness completely. We are whatever. We're completely taken by it. So these types of guys like that puts his arm up and stuff like that, they realize like, oh shit, I'm not actually my body. Like this is just like I'm focusing, I'm being distracted. So they'll take on these lifelong practices. Like I'm gonna prove to myself I'm not my body by overcoming it completely. I have the power over my body. I'm going to put my arm up and never put it down.
That's incredible.
That's interesting.
It's super dedication, like to spirituality. I mean, how more dedicated can you be?
Yeah, especially when you contrast it with like the world that we're in today, where like people can't go 2 minutes without distracting themselves. I mean, you know, I'm as guilty as the next person.
Me too.
But yeah, I mean, it's just to have that sort of, I will do something and something which is not going to score me any brownie points with it. Like, no one's going to look at me and thinking, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
You know, like somebody's learned to levitate, but I'm just stood there with my arm here. Like, but still, it's, yeah, I mean, that it's kind of almost like even more admirable because of that. It's just pure devotion and devotion to sort of, like, say, your own will to overcome the illusion of the body.
Yeah,
I did just want to just circle back to the Hinduism thing, because that you know, we mentioned how it pops up a lot in these experiences, and to me that was one of the most surprising ones, because I'd read a lot of Christianity stuff, I'd read a lot about Islam, I knew a bit of Judaism. Hinduism I knew very little of, and it just was at a certain point within my psychedelic experiences, it was just super prominent. This was before I'd read any kind of Hindu texts. And I think the way it almost seems to me that, like, Hinduism is using those psychedelic building blocks that just seem apparent, the kind of the merging of faces, the multi-armed deities and stuff. It seems to me like it's almost like Hinduism is trying to recreate that. So as all that is some kind of like truth, which is really is the core of Hinduism, that we're really what we're seeing is the true form, that the illusion dropped.
I think it's probably real.
Okay, do you want to elaborate on that?
I think it's probably real. Like, I think like these the spiritual dimension and these sort of, I don't think maybe like the gods have all these heads and arms and stuff. I think that's kind of a bit symbolic, or maybe the way our brain interprets certain patterns when we see them in the spiritual world. But something interesting about Hinduism, which Hindus and people really don't even know about, is the very first Veda. The Vedas are the scriptural conclusion of Hinduism, you know, from the start to the finish. This is what it's based on. And the very oldest Veda is called the Rig Veda, and it's all about a combination of plants that connect you to the gods. They call it Soma. So the original connection to the gods was a ritual through drinking this Soma. You press all these plants together into a little juice, and then you drink it, and you have like it takes you to the land of the gods. So I think like originally this knowledge was was super well known. It wasn't some taboo or hidden, undiscovered thing that people didn't really know about. Like even today, if you go up into the mountains, people are offering datura flowers to statues of Shiva, and they have no idea why. You ask them why, and they're just like, "Oh, it's just this Shiva. He overcomes toxic poisons, and this is a poisonous flower." But it's like, no, Shiva. They call Shiva Adi Yogi, which means the very first yogi. It's like a yogi is the same thing as a shaman. It's this shaman character. Shiva was the first. I mean, like in the story, Shiva is the first shaman. There's stories of him. He takes all these poisons and he's able to transcend the poison. That's the typical shaman. The shaman takes these poisonous plants and turns them into a spiritual substance. They come back with some kind of knowledge and wisdom, and that's like the Shiva in a person form is this character. And they're still today, like people, the sadhus in certain areas will smoke weed and they pray to Shiva beforehand. So I think there was like there is without a doubt like a shamanic lineage that's been completely covered or hidden within Hinduism. And I think like all these practices, yoga and all this stuff, is an offshoot of those initial plant practices.
Do you think is Soma? Do you think that is datura then?
No, I don't think so. No one knows what it is. We lost it. I think it's a bunch of different plants. I've seen some people say it's mushrooms. Some people said it's like a type of ayahuasca. We have no idea.
Could be like a drinkable cannabis mixed with some other psychedelic, like a tryptamine mixture.
Totally.
The other thing that the Hindus mapped out that a lot of us have experienced is the perception of the subtle body, the chakra centers. And I had this experience in my first like big LSD trip, and I didn't know about any of that. It's not like I just heard some new age person being like, oh, here's the chakras, here's what they are. I experienced it firsthand, and the Hindus and Alex Gray are like some of the only people that have mapped this out. So they, like what you said, Dakota, they were like the scientists of the soul, and they really mapped a lot of this stuff out.
Yeah, I think,
and I mean, like the Kundalini.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This is like an experience people on ayahuasca. They have like this shot of energy go up their spine or just go through their body, and then all of a sudden they're having a vision that they're getting eaten by a serpent or like getting wrapped in a coil by a serpent. This is like imagery that's been in India for 5,000 years.
Every time I have cannabis, every single time I ingest THC, I feel like my whole spine, it lights up full of this almost electricity, and then I feel these spirals going up my spine, and it traverses through all of my limbs, and it's sort of this uncontrollable symmetrical spirals that go through my whole skeletal system, and it's very intense. And I'll even get closed-eyed visions of these very elaborate algorithmic equations and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I believe that for some reason, something about my physiological system, my Kundalini temporarily lights up from THC for some reason. It doesn't happen on mushrooms or but yeah, I've had crazy experiences, even just smoking half a joint of CBD, where I'll like my whole Kundalini just lights up, and I'll go into this deep fucking meditative state, and with eyes closed I'll see fucking full-fledged 3D fractal systems that I can modulate with my thoughts, and it's crazy stuff. I think that the Kundalini is it's I guess for some people it's easily accessible through threshold doses of I mean, most people don't consider cannabis a psychedelic, but it's given me the most gnarly spiritual
it's super powerful,
crazy.
Especially if you don't smoke it all the time. Like when you smoke it all the time, it just becomes kind of like, I don't know, just this kind of numbing cream feeling for your emotions. But like when you smoke weed once a month or once every 3 months or once a year,
I've called it in the past. I've called it baby salvia.
It's almost scarier than like DMT or something.
I've called it baby salvia because it's like it's so gnarly and punishing, and it can be painful and scary. Like at this point, I've had such horrible, like hellish trips from THC that at this point, I'd rather break through on DMT than overdose on THC again. You know what I'm saying?
Oh wow!
Scared of all of it.
You know, it's fascinating.
I've never had that experience. It just doesn't do anything for me at all, and I'm jealous. I really wish I could sort of like come home, roll a joint.
Eat it.
I've gone to it like many times, but it just for me, I either just pass out or
slam it.
There's just none of this. Yeah, maybe I need to try again.
More
this conversation about Kundalini kind of reminds me. What's up?
Go ahead, Tyler.
We were talking about kind of transcending the body, but Kundalini is a spiritual matter that almost directly has to do with the body, but it's like this unified field of this higher spiritual plane and then going all the way down to the base levels. And Carl Jung, when he talked about the chakras and Kundalini, which are part of the same thing, he actually had this interesting idea that Westerners need to approach it backwards because we're already all up here. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, us getting to our spirituality is grounding in the body so that we can go out there. And I know a lot of us, myself included, when we have these big awakenings, you can feel like a total space cadet and you're just completely detached from your body. And like that can't be the ultimate goal because it has a lot of negative ramifications.
For sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is one of the things where, like, where a lot of the practice around, like, getting into your body, stuff like, we talked about this with Vivek on a previous pod, doing stuff like ice baths or like saunas or sweat lodge or something which intrinsically makes you feel in your body. Because I think we as Westerners, we are somewhat seduced by the promise of getting out of our body. And while that, I think that perspective is super, profound and meaningful, because basically, it is very, a lot of entrapment in sort of modern life. Then I think unless you can bring that experience back into the body, then that's maybe where some of the cheating sort of comes. It falls short, and you just get people then chasing the high kind of thing, and that's where I think you can end up with people like getting slightly fucked up on psychedelics. And certainly, I get some messages from people think, "Wow, dude, you need to stop doing this this shit. You need to go become a guru in India or something like."
Yeah.
And actually, maybe a little backwards from what we've all been talking about, I've found the most effective spiritual development for me personally is just flat out sobriety. Like, I'm somebody who is so heady and analytical and technical with things that every time I have a little too much mushrooms, I'll start to kind of get slippery, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to ground myself. So typically after mushrooms, I'll just have like this 3-4 month stretch of just absolute sobriety, because on the mushrooms, it kind of scares me a little bit. I'm like, oh, I can get a little squirrely, a little out there, and I think that's sort of opening the door of what we call schizophrenia or psychosis, right? And I think that the fix for this is just absolute grounding, sober grounding, that's how it is for me. But yeah, sobriety has helped me really get in touch with myself. And also exercise, getting some sun, drinking water, fresh, like good diet, healthy nutrition. These things are very grounding. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be comfortable, but just working out, exercising, like straight up exercise plus cold and hot water therapy, that kind of stuff, active recovery, like getting in the body with like intentionally, consciously get into this physical form. That's one of the most spiritual things you can do, believe it or not, is to fully immerse yourself into this physical experience, because that's where you find yourself, and to be as present as you can, be here now. You want to get into this physical form and fully immerse yourself into it and fully surrender into this form, and that sober grounding is some of the best spiritual progress I've ever made. And then I find myself so prepared for the next psilocybin journey that when I take it, it's so much more impactful and helpful than if I were just eating psilocybin every week or smoking all the time. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that squirreliness, that sort of what schizophrenia-ness that you're talking about, that is, which I think is fairly uncontroversial. When you have one of the experiences, you are really opening a potential to just absolute chaos. But within that chaos is great creativity. There's great novelty. There's all these things which are the positive aspects of chaos. But it is chaos. And if you keep stacking chaos on top of chaos, then sooner or later that's just going to collapse, and that's where you're going to end up with just people who just completely lost the plot. So I think what you're sort of prescribing, I would say, is very sensible. It's like dip into that chaos, because without chaos there's too much order, and then that just is a far too restrictive a regime. So we need a little bit of the chaos, but then it's all about this kind of integration and bring it back and sort of balance your chaos and your order, rather than just trying to stack too much control up or trying to stack too much chaos up. And I think that's going to lead, I think one of the really insidious things with the just going after these sort of psychedelic experiences is that they can completely convince you of just bizarre fucking nonsense, like just the most fucking, and it will seem like the more realer than realer thing will kick in, and it just seems like complete truth. Well, I think that's part of the practice. What stops these things from being cheating is that if you've got to bring it back, you've got to have that bit of sobriety. You've got to have either that, or you've got to be, one of Dakota's gurus who's just like, this is just an average Tuesday morning for me. It doesn't touch the sides. But yeah, I think I tend to do the same thing. Look, I have an experience, and then I take some time off to process that. Wasn't necessarily the case in my younger days, but getting older a bit now, so I try and do things a bit more thoughtfully. So we were talking about like some of the lines between like what we would call spirituality and like religions, and like this kind of like, let's say, like a spiritual DNA they have. What do you think about like some of the wackier religions? Like, do you think, is there anything that we've been talking about tonight that's like in common with, like, say, Scientology? Like, and this is kind of the thing where like spirituality, where like anybody, it's just such a loose label, and this is why I was kind of trying to define it out at the beginning. Like, is a cult spiritual? Is Scientology spiritual? Is a few of us have been talking about things like lasers influencing DMT trips. Is that spiritual? Is all this transhuman stuff spiritual? I mean,
can I speak to that? Since I was raised in a cult for like 20 years, so I know a decent amount about what it's like on the inside. It's not. So it's a mechanism designed to intercept spirituality, and that mechanism is built on core principles of spirituality, but it's very devious in that it intercepts any chances of you kind of breaking out of their ideology, more or less. So it's a false sense of spirituality. And the more that I learn about the concept of cults and expand my thinking on it, I think most religions fall under that umbrella of cult-like ideology, where you're not allowed to venture outside of these four walls.
Because they're trying to limit the way you're thinking, I guess. Which is
because
like
it's all about control. It's all about, well, I have the story, so listen to me. And that is kind of like the recipe for a religion in general, is that you need to go to a third party, more or less, to get this inherent sense of spirituality that we all get just from breathing. Do
you mind what was the nature of the cult that you're in, if you don't? If that's
not too personal? I was raised in the cult called Jehovah's Witnesses, but I don't know how much people know. Basically, no one knows anything about this stuff on the outside, right? But if you look into the origins of it, it's essentially a 3-tiered system of cult ideology, and it's catered to different wealth classes. So the wealth, like the high end, high class cult would be Scientology. Middle class is Mormons, and then the lower class is Jehovah's Witnesses, that's where I was. And that's basically what it is. It's the same, like, very, very strict Abrahamic cult-like ideology, just changed a little bit to cater to different wealth classes, and it's just a mechanism of control.
Okay. I mean, I've got some familiarity with Jehovah's Witnesses. They would come and like knock on our doors, and back when I lived in England, and they would sort of have, like, is it the lighthouse? Is that what they would hand out? And the pamphlet thing?
Yeah, they love their literature. They love pamphlets and stuff.
Did you ever do that, Jake? Did you ever go door to door?
For a year? Yeah, I mean, you don't really have a choice when you're in these things. Like, there is no opting out. That you're told. And the other thing is, like, all of these religions, cults are basically doomsday cults. Like, the whole premise of their ideology is that there's some endpoint to the world that we live in right now, and if you don't buy what I'm selling, then you're going to die at the end. So that's really why. It
sounds fun a little bit. I know it's not fun because it must suck to be in it, but there's like a part of it that's like, man, everyone just in it together,
right? And it's exactly there are moments where it's just like anything else, where you're like, it would really be nice to just slip into the Matrix again and have built-in friends and a built-in just
Yeah, I like
everything.
that.
But
A
you're
little
not
bit.
allowed out, and you're taught from, since you can speak, that you're preparing for essentially like a second Holocaust that's coming your way. You're preparing to be thrown in sort of some sort of torture camp for your belief systems, and that's really how they hook you. You're not allowed to leave. You're not allowed to talk to your friends or family if you question anything that they tell you, and you have to be prepared to die for your beliefs. And that's like the second you crawl, that's what you're taught.
Right.
So
It's
it's hard to have
like
exactly. It's hard to have a sense of real
God-fearing.
spirituality.
But I think like the basis of what gets people to fall for these things is a spiritual basis. Like people are searching for some kind of something deeper and
meaning.
So I think there is still a spiritual aspect to it.
Right. It's
Well,
like
it's
Like you
it's
said,
a
it's like
spiritual
it's
longing.
getting intercepted.
Yeah, it's a sad mimicry of it. It's not, when you're in it, it's very hollow and unfulfilling, and you're not getting any sort of meaningful answers to things. You're not even allowed to ask questions or think for yourself. It's a very hollow form of spirituality where it like you said, it mimics all the characteristics of it, and they kind of check all the boxes of things that you would want to have in a worldview, but in practice there is no love or freedom, and those things can't exist with, you can't have a sense of spirituality without those things.
Controlled opposition.
It's tough.
Yeah. I heard like there's a theory that like as humans we have this, you could call it basically like a spiritual shaped hole which creates this sense of longing, but anything can plug into that hole. So you can have something which is filling that hole and it feels like it's fulfilling that requirement, but it's completely misfiring. And, there's even like variations of it. Normally when you see somebody with this kind of hole filled, it's not common that it's multiple things. So like an example here would be, you don't typically find someone who's passionate about religion, but also passionate about aliens. Like one seems to fill the hole and the other one doesn't. Likewise, in a lot like sort of modern culture, there's, people who are very strongly, like where their entire life is some form of activism, tend also not to have any kind of like spiritual thing in them. So these people tend to be like very atheistic, but their sense of community and belonging and life meaning is being filled by some form of activism. And so like lots of things plug into this hole. And I was seeing an interview with some guy who was like some sociology professor, and he, just as like humanities goes through sort of phases where it's kind of like, at some point it's like like it might be the crown, like the queen is like this is the thing that plugs the hole, or it could be like in the 1920s was this like great feeling of like the world was turning and like some sort of utopia's coming in, or or patriotism or whatever, and all these things. And he says like he thinks the next biggest thing is actually going to be aliens, that will become the next big belief system. And that's kind of why we're seeing all this kind of stuff in the news at the moment where it's setting up like the building blocks for there to be some sort of like, almost like aliens that's kind of to take off in the way that
belief system, though. I think we just got to misconstrue.
Well, I would say it's very fringe. It's very. I mean, I would say one thing where, like, I think is just imagine this, but it exploded times a million. So when I was like in my 20s and I first heard like the rumbles of flat Earth, this was a complete fucking joke to me. There was no way this was going to go anywhere. And now flat Earth is a thing. Now, it's not anything in the same way that any of these other things have, but it's more of a thing than I ever thought it would be. Aliens has a lot more building blocks in place than flat Earth. And I'm not saying aliens is true or not true. Like it's not something I'm super interested in, but I think the cultural building blocks of like X-Files, Fire in the Sky, just all this stuff coming out of things. And there's some sort of hope and meaning tied up in that. It's weird. Like I've even been in the Amazon and had them talking about aliens and stuff. It seems like it slots into something like shamanism or something like that very easily, where it's like, oh yeah, we were drinking ayahuasca and then the mothership just fucking flew overhead. Like I've heard very traditional people having those conversations. So aliens feels like it plugs in across a lot of different things. And yeah, whether that becomes a new spiritual thing. I mean, fuck knows. Like, yeah, I could certainly see it happening in some ways.
Yeah, I definitely see it. I mean, if you look at just like the people on YouTube, especially within like the spiritual psychedelic community, it's all like the DMT aliens gave me this information and the ayahuasca aliens. And I mean, beyond that, like you said, it's all in the news and people are talking about it. And Joe Rogan podcast always like got whistleblowers and stuff on there. Yeah, I think it's cool. I like the idea that there's aliens out there because, I mean, if aliens are real, it at least shows us like, okay, the universe is crazy. It breaks us out of our normal kind of routine because people just go to work, you just go to school, you just have your family, and you don't even think about anything deeper than that. So I think like an alien coming will
shake the snow globe a little bit,
a hammer. Yeah, exactly. Shake the snow globe a little bit and just like have people remember like you're a part of something that's kind of insane, you know.
I have a remark on that.
Yeah,
actually,
life in general. You're a part of something that's very, very weird.
I think that
you got to what, Loco?
I hope aliens come. I'm praying for it. I mean, like for me, I think I want that. I pray for a future where the aliens come and.
Well, I think it would certainly open up the doors to this idea that there is. I mean, it would just become the instant, very tangible thing that there is something greater than us, something in every possible way. If we're talking about something capable of interstellar travel, and you know, as a kid, one of my favorite movies was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because I think that perfectly captures that sense of something arriving, and it is mystical and it is spiritual. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen Close Encounters. I feel like a bit of a dinosaur here, but there's a part where all these guys in India are all chanting, they're all singing, like something that has just happened to them, and it is beyond their comprehension, and they sing praise to the mothership, and they sing this sort of chanting over and over, and it's fucking beautiful. It's like one of the most like, and they're like saying like, you know, like where did this come from? And all these like 300 sort of indie guys just like, the sky, it came from the sky, and it was like. It's just such a beautiful example of that kind of thing that Terence McKenna talked about, that this, what might be seen as like the arrival of technology really would trigger some sort of global shift in consciousness and a whole new meaning of to like, yeah, are we alone? You know, like that question's kind of answered. Okay, well, how do we now, you know, communicate with these, you know, beings who are looking for the same answers that we are, and even though we might be you know, completely different, it's a beautiful prospect.
And just like in general, regardless if aliens are coming or not, we are in such a bizarre transitional period in every direction. Every direction is a rumble or a shake that's like that's bringing in something new through our politics, through our religions, through things like the new technologies and AI and aliens. In every direction, it's like, holy shit, like we're coming up to the horizon finally. Like for millions of years, it was just kind of quiet. There was not, you know, the horizon seemed so big and so far away and not really much going on. And now, like within the last 100 years, 200 years, it's just like exponentially
it's
crazy.
And maybe AI is the alien.
For some reason, we're the ones that are like born to usher it in.
I mean, just the shit that has happened in my lifetime, from like the most basic computers to this age of supreme connectivity to, I mean, video phones were some sort of futuristic thing.
Look how fast we got used to it.
I know, yeah. I mean, and then you see, like, you know, our kids, what are they getting used to? And it's, now we're talking about AI and stuff, and it's, I mean, AI could be the alien. I mean, it is, we're talking about something so vastly inhuman.
Yeah, it's got to come in a way that's like digestible.
For sure.
Because if it shows up in a ship, we're all gonna, you know, it'll break down society. So it's got to like.
I think maybe it came in the form of a tryptamine already, and it's just on the other side of the wall.
Well, that's another thing that seems very common to these psychedelic experiences. It's like that feeling of spiritual technology, of like spiritual biotechnology, that this is some kind of, you know, program encoded into chemicals in a way that can be delivered to species such as ourselves. Terence McKenna does great rants on this, like what would be the best if you wanted to transmit a message about the nature of existence. Surely this is it. This you would put it in a chemical thing whereby anyone could ingest it and it just unravels. There's no sort of translation required. It's just pure meaning. And so, yeah, I mean, that feeling has come to me a bazillion times, that this is spiritual technology, which allows us to communicate across consciousness, so that there's there's no translation problem of how does the human talk to the zebra or talk to the ant or talk to the plant. No, we just have this level playing field of consciousness in DMT space, whereby, it's just communicating instantaneously across all species, across all distance, across all time, from my ancestors through to my sort of successors, through to like the praying mantis people on Tau Ceti to whatever. It's just, it just solves that problem, that the universe is just so vast and so large and so timeless, and that we're so different. How do you solve that problem? DMT. There you go. It's accessible to all. That's my theory. Gabe, you're very quiet, mate.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, I think that. Oh, I'm sorry, I blanked out there. I got like 3 hours of sleep last night, so I've been like kind of struggling with this podcast, guys. But what were you just saying, Rob? I'm sorry.
I was just rambling about transmitting interstellar messages via the medium of DMT.
Casual.
Yeah. No, I think that.
Sounds God
bless, right. Gabe, bless you for showing up, dude. Bless you for showing up.
That's good. I'm happy to be here, guys.
Can I jump in and say something insane? Kind of like a theory that was cooking in the back of my mind. While
Jake, if you didn't say something insane, I'd be disappointed.
That's right. That's why I'm here. Yeah, no, you were just saying so many juicy things that my brain was cooking in the background, and I was thinking about okay, so what if rather than us thinking about things separated, right, where we're thinking of things in the context of human beings being a separate organism from these fungal entities that are growing on our planet, and we consume them and bring them into our consciousness and then kind of merge in this weird symbiotic relationship. What if on a higher dimensional plane, we are more aligned into being the same organism that we just can't tell right now? And that what we're experiencing right now is the culmination of this weird fungal entity just growing exponentially like it does. Where I don't know if anyone has grown mushrooms here, but the rate of growth is so astounding, where it seems like there's nothing going on, and then overnight virtually the cell growth is through the roof, and you have actual like tangible things that you can see and touch, and then the next day you have just like so many mushrooms all over the place. It feels like right now we are observing that moment in time where our mycelium is starting to fruit, and we're like, oh my god, look at we have all these mushrooms, we have all these technological innovations, and maybe we're just happen to observe that timeline right now where we're in a fruiting phase and we're reaping the harvest, so to speak, and we're more sort of like this weird hybrid creature operating on a higher dimension that we can't see right now.
Yeah, I would.
I like that idea. What would be the fruit?
What would be the fruit? So I mean, it would be just like the
consciousness.
Yeah, like the byproduct of consciousness.
I think it's the creator.
It's creation.
I think we're doing the cycle, guys. Like, I think we're going to create ourselves again. Like, we're going to create, like, me and Jake were talking about this in our podcast the other day. Yeah, but I think, we don't kill each other, and we keep advancing, like Dakota said, in this sort of exponential fashion. With the AI stuff, it's like, are we just going to create God again? Like this thing that can create universes and realities and simulations.
Well, it seems like the end goal.
Yeah, and I don't know where
else can it go,
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where else it really leads to besides that,
Because that's the coolest place to go.
You become enlightened through like sitting down and being a monk, or you take the long way and build machines. It's all like you plugging in you're plugging in no matter what to this God state of consciousness. Like one day, if we do merge with machines, it's just going to be like a pure potential. You know, you plug into the machine, and then like any reality you want, it's just there. Any body you want, you just manifest it.
But at that point, how is that
that's
different than
that's the spiritual
how is that
realm,
any different than the spiritual realm? Because it's the same conscious experience.
I think it's just two portals, two different portals into the same space.
Crazy, dude. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's why I think that's why the higher dimension, like the flat world, is the perfect illustration for all of this. Where we're seeing circles changing size. We have no concept of the sphere passing through our dimension. I think we're part of those higher dimensional shapes that we just can't fathom right now.
I think something fascinating.
Yeah, it's also like we're not necessarily in control of it. Like it.
Based on what Dakota was saying about how
I think
there
what Rob
two
said
different portals to the same place. It's like we have the tools and the means to get there naturally, organically, or we could just fucking be what is it? Just like we'll be stubborn and try to just build it ourselves when it was already given to us through natural means. It's like, when are we going to just surrender to the existing tools or the features that are built in? They're not bugs, they're features. And you're talking about cheating. It's like there's no cheat to something that's already given. So it's like it's all available. It's always been available. It's in a sense, it's the deeper part of you that you're almost trying to shy away from, whether it's through fear or guilt or whatever. But it's like for us to try to rebuild the singularity through AI or technology is such a back-asswards way to do it. You know what I'm saying? It's like we could just surrender to or be humble and just submit to the plants or to meditation or any means to transcend the physical, which is ultimately where humanity's headed. So
yeah,
I think a lot of individuals are doing that, but I think it's like a collective sort of life force of humanity. For whatever reason, our momentum right now is carrying us in the way of AI. Like I resonate with what you're saying, Loka, about like, you know, that's already kind of been gifted to us in a way. But what if it is just sort of like within the larger scale cycle of universes? What if this is just a cycle that repeats itself? And because if you think about our current understanding of the universe, at least from where we stand, it's like, all right, this shit seems like it's almost infinite, at least in terms of like planets and possibilities and things. It's like, all right, so if we're not creating the AI God robot, like, what are the chances? Like, somebody likely has or like will eventually.
It's a matter of time.
That thing Rob said too about the sort of like, and that thing Rob said there about the sort of biosynthetic, technologically advanced nature of the DMT experience, like that's something I've thought a lot of too, is because, you know, it's very like crystalline and Hindu and trippy, but a common theme that I have experienced is a very like it feels a lot of these trips feel technologically advanced. I'll even meet beings and landscapes that seem like, and this is going to sound kind of douchebaggy because we're talking about AIs and computers and shit, but it seems like a like supercomputer, like smart computer, like a living organism computer in a way. But that's just, I guess, from my perspective and some of my experiences. But
yeah, I mean, it feels that way, especially like sometimes in like the ayahuasca or the mushrooms or something, you come in contact with like intelligent shapes, and like it feels like the inner working of like some intelligent machine. And it's like it's like encoded and telepathic, and like it's just almost too complex to even fully begin to talk about. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
I think one thing with this kind of line of with technology and sort of just gluing it back to sort of spirituality, particularly in around what we've been saying about things like aliens and that spiritual moment of being a species, and the mothership appears, and it's, you know, you can offer praise. Not praise necessarily to the aliens, but praise to the universe. Like, thank you, that we're not alone. There's something amazing here. Now, when we talk about technology, why not us? Why not? Why we're waiting for the aliens to come appear? but they've got to get their shit together and come and visit us. That could be us. We could be the ones as a species delivering that species, that transformative experience to someone else, and that's going to require great technology and great tools. So while I would completely agree, Loki, with what you're saying about in terms of like the personal growth, then there's also a part of species growth, like physical growth, the ability to explore the entire fucking universe, which has been there for us to marvel at and to sort of, bask in the rings of Jupiter and be the ones who appear before another species and collaborate with them and stuff.
Yeah,
and
I think that's
of
inevitable.
course, that comes at the risk of getting it drastically wrong and completely fucking.
I think it's completely inevitable. Yeah.
But I think that technology aspect is there's something there to embrace.
And I think that we take on.
I just want to jump in and ask
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question kind of to understand where everyone's at with the whole alien thing specifically, because like to put myself on the line, my reputation, what little there is of it, like I have had alien experiences, right? Like abductions or whatever the fuck you want to call them. And those are outside of taking psychedelics, right? So now like that's a whole other ball of wax that I'm trying to grapple with and assimilate into my worldview. And so for me, from my perspective, like they're fucking here. Aliens are here. Like I have no control over when they fucking want to interact with me. I don't know what's going on. I know for me personally, like I don't have any doubts as to whether or not these things exist, whether or not there are other species operating these technologically advanced things and interacting with us. I've had firsthand experience with it. So I'm just curious as to how you all categorize that if we're kind of operating under the assumption that we haven't made contact yet, or these things are up in the air.
Well, that's what I was wondering with what Rob was saying about that idea of the sort of aliens taking over as a new religion, because from what I'm like witnessing, it seems like psychedelics have a lot of momentum building around them. And like, I think we're all sort of like witnessing that together, and I think that in this cool way, psychedelics is going to be like people who take psychedelic drugs in this world are going to kind of be like their own religion. And it's not going to be like this one like boxed in thing, but it's going to be its own sort of like category. And people really are going to like be about that and believe in that. And then like if the aliens do come though, like the physical aliens at the same time, and you got like, the fucking Pope or whatever who like pulls some shit out of the Vatican, and he's like, actually, this is the real like updated testament. So this is what the fuck we're doing, it's like, I can see there being like a lot of division there between people being like, well, it's the internal aliens that are the gods, and these other dudes are trying to mislead us. And like, I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah,
I think at the point where you've got the mothership in the sky, it kind of settles the debate. It's like, unless like the Pope comes wheeling out in his new Pope-mobile, he's like UFO Pope-mobile. It's like, yeah, I told you motherfuckers, I had this all along. So
yeah, we could be dealing with an ecosystem too. Like the mushroom aliens are like one species that found their niche, just like mushrooms as an organism have.
Totally.
And then there's like the ones that like to go skinny dipping in the third dimension, the ones that we're seeing in the UFOs. And then there's also this idea of like what you were talking about, Gabe, and what Loco was talking about, that maybe humans will speciate and will divide. Like some of us want to be all natural and be in an environment which we were evolved to live and take mushrooms, and then the other ones want to go the technological route. So there's also a chance we could totally just divide from this point on and become like a different species down the line.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
I just want to say, I think it's hilarious that people always hold like the thing that will convince people that aliens exist are if they meet the Pope or the president, which are like the two least trustworthy individuals. Like, I don't know why they're like, as soon as the Pope's involved, then I'll start believing. Like, what are you talking about? I don't believe him now. I don't give a fuck if he's seeing UFOs.
Who would you nominate, Jake? Who would you nominate to be the ambassador for humanity before the Calaxian Empire or whatever?
Oh, dude, I don't even know. I feel like, honestly, it just has to be children. I feel like as soon as like you have, group testimony from children, like when you see a child retell an account of something like intense or traumatic, or like they're not fucking lying. They're not making shit up. Like, you know that something affected them deeply, and you have to investigate that. So I think as soon as like any child who's trustworthy, I feel like that's probably the best route. That'd be like the most neutral, the least biased.
That is the most beautifully naive thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, no, like, you ever heard of the group account in like South Africa somewhere, like maybe Zimbabwe? Yeah. There was like a class of children that all saw the UFO. Like that, I feel like it's one of the most credible UFO sightings in all of human history, all of documented UFO sightings.
Someone grabbed the alien and they got sick, right?
There was some. I'm pretty sure there's a physical encounter. They all had identical stories. There was like 50 kids, and they all went out in like the field. They saw the UFO. They all reported the same exact like awful smells. And I wish I knew more specifics, but yeah. I feel like those types of encounters are the ones that are really going to sway people. Where it's like, how do you take 50 kids, all separate them, ask them the same story, and they all have identical stories of something phenomenal? I mean, sure. But like, I worked in pediatrics. Kids are fucking liars, and not two of them tell the same story. So those are the encounters that are most impactful to me.
I have.
Give Dakota some booth, or send him off to some kids' school. He'll come back with all sorts of fucking
stuff. I
stories.
have a remark on this. I think that ultimately, the leader in your life, you need to find it within yourself. You need to find out the discovery that you're fully capable of dictating and empowering yourself in your own life. So this is something I found out on the mushrooms. I was like, I started thinking about, one of my earlier psilocybin journeys, I had this sort of thought process that I went down, this train of thought where I was analyzing government systems and cultures and societies and all this stuff. And I just started laughing, and I was like, do I really need that to live? Do I really need that to feel whole and to discover my true potential? And this really allowed me to recognize the true power that I hold, which is my own sovereignty and my own autonomy. And when I discovered this, I was like, wait, I could probably just go live off the grid, get my own food, get my own water, and live wholly, right? Not HOLY, but WHO,
yeah.
Yeah, well, both.
So when the aliens come, don't send them to the president.
Yeah, but to outsource,
send them to the anarchist commune.
Outsource your highest needs to organizations and corporations and stuff like this, you're selling your own power, and you're becoming the world's bitch in a way. And it's like, no, you can. Something about being your own person is learning how to take life by the horns, and that right there is self-empowerment. Not making an OnlyFans and taking a bunch of drugs and living recklessly, in a sense. I think that fully realizing your own potential that was given to you by birth, your own individual body, your avatar, right? I think that right there, if you really contemplate on that, you can find out that you are completely whole. You are organically whole, and that right there can propel you into full confidence and courageousness into any endeavor you could possibly imagine.
To kind of further that point, sorry, it was something that I thought of before, and I wanted to mention it, but I lost my thought. And then what you said, something that reminded me of it perfectly, where like all of these topics that we're talking about, kind of like dancing around these different ways that people express spirituality. It was reminding me of how, like, take like a medication, right, or any chemical structure, and how it fits into our cells, right? It fits into these receptor points, and some aspects of the molecule are designed to kind of fit that puzzle piece and create a chemical reaction, or sometimes it fits the puzzle piece to block something off, right? And so all of these different spiritual modalities, they all fit that puzzle piece, right? They all can lock into place, but not all of them, not all of the receptors are always being used. A lot of them are being blocked off by these cult-like ideologies, these restrictive teachings. And as soon as you stop trying to fit a new puzzle piece in, stop trying to replace your one ideological system with another ideological system, and you just take out the puzzle piece altogether, just leave your receptors free, that's when you experience everything. That's when you experience the universe and God and realize that it was everything all at once. And so to further your point and to answer the question better, fuck kids. I don't need to have any eyewitnesses of children.
That's going to get clipped.
FBI.
The real answer is exactly what Lucas stated, where it's like, it's just within you. You don't need to rely on any outside sources. And that's the thing that kind of trips people up, is they're always trying to fit some new puzzle piece into their sense of spirituality, where you don't need anything. You just let it be, experience everything, and you'll get to the answers.
I love that.
Well, on that bombshell, I don't know if you quite realize what you said there, Jake.
Don't clip it.
It was
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to clip it. I mean, this is going to go. This will be the viral clip. But no, guys, I think it's been a really, really great discussion, and I thank you all so much for sort of taking part. I think it's probably a good place to leave it off. But has anyone got any sort of like closing words that you want to sort of just throw into the pot as a sort of a parting thought for our audience?
Yeah, I'll go.
Tyler.
Oh,
Tyler, go.
Just overall, my thoughts on spirituality is that it's something that's so highly personal and catered to the individual, just like your own sexuality or your own tastes. And it often comes whenever you surrender to whatever is greater. People say, they use this language, do you believe in a higher power? Or there's all different kinds of words for it. For me, I like, primordial source, or like something like along those lines. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that, is that it's so unique to the individual, but it has to do with giving yourself away and letting go of this part of you to that greater whole.
Gabe, you want to come in with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a better sort of explanation of how I saw spirituality, because I feel like my elaboration earlier was really shitty. But essentially, like, I've noticed that within these very intense psychedelic experiences is when I tend to feel the most spiritual, and then there's this constant sort of balancing act after the fact of like trying to keep that like positive momentum, if you will. And I think a lot of people are in a similar sort of like juggling act with this. So, and I don't think there's like a particular sort of like goal or endpoint that I'm looking for with spirituality. I think like my being and the expression of my being is a constant evolution. So yeah, that's where I'll leave it off.
Cool. I'll just throw in my couple thoughts. I think, in terms of how it's defined or what it feels like, I think it's one of those things, ineffable and stuff are appropriate words, because it is a personal experience, but it's also something that feels very common across us. I think we can recognize it in each other, and certainly, think on things like being on retreat or doing psychedelics, you recognize those lights come on, and it's a beautiful thing to see that in somebody else. But yeah, it is extremely personal. I think the closest word I could use to describe it, which I think is very, again, common across the psychedelic experience, is it feels like home. Like that feeling of homeness and this is, it applies to psychedelics. I think this is why psychedelics themselves are spiritual, because they can have that feeling of home, but it's not exclusive to them, where you kind of have that feeling of home in a community, on your own, watching the sunset, feeling just at one with your species, watching a campfire. Just it's there, it's accessible at any sort of point in time, but under what conditions it arises God, literally God knows. I mean, but it's there. It feels like home, and it feels like serenity, like peace, and it's just okay. It to me, it's not super euphoria. It's not it's that feeling of that everything is going to be okay. It's going to work out. Even if you drop dead in the next second with your kidneys explode, it's going to be okay. Because I think what we're ultimately, this feeling of homeness is consciousness. I think that's what we came from. That's what we're going back to. This is temporary. That doesn't mean it's meaningless. It doesn't mean it's just, this is an instance of a bigger timeless tale of consciousness. And that's where I'll leave it.
I just want to say thank you first and foremost, like, for constantly organizing these things, and like all of you.
It's my pleasure, mate.
All of you have made content that I would like say has kind of been folded into my own sense of spirituality. So like these conversations are so fun and beautiful, but I kind of want to temper that with saying, like, that's all they are to kind of like the audience. Like, none of what we're saying is ranked any higher than your own belief systems or thoughts and your own questions on spirituality. Like exactly like what Tyler was saying and kind of everyone was touching on, like they only use this just to explore your own sense of spirituality and maybe think of new questions you hadn't thought of before, but don't take anything that we say as gospel or anything more than that, because we're just trying to figure it out for ourselves too. And this is how we're doing it.
Damn right.
The word God, G-O-D, right?
Yeah.
Generator, observer, destroyer. We are the observer. We find ourselves in the observer mode, right? And I think spirituality is the journey of discovering the other two letters, that you are that as well. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. I love doing these. Thank you, Rob, for the opportunity. This has been a blessing.
It's my pleasure. It's a gift to have you all here. And I think, yeah, let's give the final word to Dakota. Dakota, do you want to see us out, mate?
Sure.
No pressure.
Thanks. Yeah, no pressure. Thanks. Yeah, thank you all you guys. You guys all have really good ideas and cool things to talk about. I think it's I think right now, we live in a very sick culture. I think like there really are poisoning us with our food, with our minds, with the media we watch, everything. We're being poisoned and we're being intentionally hypnotized and distracted. And I think any conversation that's telling people to disconnect from that and to focus on spirituality or to focus on something that's more true is a worthy conversation. So it's really cool that you guys do these, and in the future I would love to do more if you want.
Please do.
But yeah, for me, just to wrap up my thoughts on spirituality, I think that we, like you said, Rob, like we're in this temporary experience. And I mean, you can look at that as meaningless or find meaning in that or whatever. But beyond this little temporary happening that we're in, there is like just this infinite thing that's just echoing forever. And it's like underneath all the names, underneath all the forms. And I think all spirituality is an attempt to just point towards that. Whether it's Jesus, whether it's Jehovah Witnesses, or I think we're all trying to like just see beyond, to see beyond. And I think, yeah, however you do that is valid, and it is very personal. And I think no matter where you look, if you look sincerely, it'll be there waiting for you. So thanks again for having me on here.
It's been an absolute
Happy
pleasure.
Holidays to all you guys.
Yeah, guys, it's been absolutely great, and thank you so much once again for making your time. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk to each and every one of you guys. I learn so much every time we speak, and I enjoy these conversations so much. So thank you. I wish you all the best for your whatever holidays or whatever it is that you believe in, and same to anyone who's watching this. Hopefully, I should get this up and published in the next couple of days. So to our audience at home, we wish you the happiest Christmas, if that's your thing. Certainly a happy new year, and whatever other meanings and things you want to put onto it until the aliens arrive. So on that note,
Gabe, go to bed.
Thanks everyone. I'll say bye.